Right, thank you. I think before we start the meeting, we're going to do some introduction. I think we'll start from here, the top table. I'm Councillor Edith McCauley, and I'm the chair of the Licensing Committee.
I'm Councillor Paul Kohler. I'm the vice chair of the Licensing Committee.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Jade Watts from Democratic Services, and I'll be clerking today's meeting.
I'm Councillor Dollymore. I'm the Councillor for St Helier Ward.
And I'm Councillor Welton, a former chair of the Licensing Committee and Councillor for Pollards Hill.
I'm James Wiscroft. I'm the councillor for Lower Morden.
I'm Stephen Mercer. I'm the councillor for Merton Park Ward.
I'm Caroline Charles, councillor for Ravensbury Ward.
I'm Robert Page, councillor for West Barnes.
Samantha MacArthur, councillor for Wimbledon Park.
I'm Councillor Eleanor Stringer, Deputy Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Civic Pride, and I have a guest with me tonight, but she's just an observer.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Sarah Quinn. I'm the Commercial Services Manager for the RSP. So we serve Merton, Richmond and Wandsworth, and I oversee the licensing teams, food and safety and trading standards.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Caroline Sharkey. I'm the licensing manager for Merton, Wandsworth and Richmond.
Evening all, I'm Zoe Gallen. I'm the lead for domestic abuse and VOG.
Thank you. My name is Calvin McLean and I'm the Assistant Director of Public Protection at Merton.
The agenda. Are there any apologies for absence? I think Jill Manley should be online. Jill, are you on?
I am, yes. Councillor Jill Manley for Cricket Green.
Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? Nope. Right, thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? No, none. Right, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, and that was on the 20th of June last year. Have you all got copies of the last meeting, minutes of the last meeting? We'll do it with the any matters arising together. Are there any matters arising on page 1? Page 2? And page 3? Are we all happy that the minutes are accurate and it will be signed by me? Thank you. Right, thank you. Now we move on to agenda item number 4, a verbal update, which is going to be presented by Eleanor Stringer, the Cabinet Member for Civic Pride.
Thank you very much. I do have.
Oops. It's not good enough.
Oh, good. I was about to say we do have some slides as well. Well done. You're much more efficient than I am. First of all, Chair, thank you very much for this invitation, and Vice Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity to come and talk to you about this area of work, which is growing for us and of great importance to us. And we're really keen that the Licensing Committee is involved in this from the start. So this is really good timing from our point of view. So me and my colleagues have been working on this, and there's been much more coming on the past over the coming year. So we're on through an overview, and then we're really keen for questions, Chair, if that's okay. So firstly, a bit of background on kind of why we're talking about nighttime economy now. So firstly, the new cabinet role for Civic Pride was created last year, and that brings together political responsibility for many areas that are linked to the nighttime economy, but that previously been split up across different roles. So I have responsibility for the licensing and the regulatory services, the local economy, culture, equalities, all the violence against women, antisocial behaviour work. And then with the new administration coming in last summer, we were always clear on the ambition that we wanted to support our economy, including supporting a thriving nighttime economy, but doing so in a way which lives up to our values of kind of putting residents at the heart of what we're doing and make sure that we work with them. And the kind of third reason why this is important, and this is the right time to be talking about this, is our town centres are changing. We know the pandemic has changed how we all use our local neighbourhoods. So residents are in their local area more. You've got fewer commuters in some areas, but more in others. Business needs are changing. And over the past couple of years, there has been very rightly a renewed greater interest on women's safety and a recognition that it's just not acceptable that women don't feel safe on the streets at night. So this is the kind of context that we're working on, and why this is exactly the right time that we're talking about this. So firstly, what do we mean by nighttime economy? So the very first thing to say is this is not about opening nightclubs in every neighbourhood across Merton, and it's not even really mostly about nightclubs. The way to think about it is it's everything that kind of happens between 6 p.m. in the evening and 6 a.m. the next morning. So, you know, it's how do we use our neighbourhoods at night? You know, I'm here with my daughter. She doesn't go to bed at 6 p.m. Not many children do. People are out of their night. They're socialising, they're eating, they might be doing sports and physical activity at one of our five-a-side pitches or one of the many gyms in our areas, and shopping. And secondly, it's thinking about, well, who is it that's using our neighbourhoods at night? Yes, residents like us who live here, but also kind of visitors coming to meet here because it's a great place to be, but also night workers who might be coming here to work and night commuters who might be going through, for example, Morden on their way to jobs very early in the morning. And we've got to understand the benefits and the risks of what it is that's involved in all these aspects of activity and making sure that we're supporting them but mitigating any risks. The third thing that's really important to note is, and you can see it's very plainly just going around our borough, the nighttime economy varies really substantially in different parts of the borough. So we know there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach for all of Merton. So what have we done so far? The next slide outlines our kind of key actions. So firstly, quite early on in me having this role, we applied for funding to develop a kind of pop-up night market in Mitcham Town Centre. So Mitcham's an area where there isn't much nighttime activity at all, but there is a beautiful market area that the council had invested in. So, and in other parts of London, night markets have been really popular. So we applied for funding for that really early on. That was sadly unsuccessful. But it has kind of prompted us to kind of see if we can look at hiring market manager, town centre manager to start developing that market further and maybe take forward bits of that ambition. The Nighttime Women's Safety Project began back in the summer as well, which is Home Office funded, and Zoe will go into this in more detail in a few slides. Back in the autumn, we had Amy LeMay, the Night Czar for the Mayor of London, and her team came to walk around Mitcham and Wimbledon at night with us. I know other neighbourhoods exist, but we couldn't cover them all in one evening. And she also spoke to business owners and the police and kind of get a sense for what's going on in these areas and where the successes are and where the challenges are. And then just before Christmas, we had a half-day workshop funded by the GLA, who've got some consultants or kind of on retainer who could help us. And that brought together key council departments. So some of the people here today, but also Future Merton as well, to prepare the ground for developing a strategy. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I went to the first ever London at Night conference with lots of other local authority members and companies from across London who are looking at this, because there's a recognition that London as a whole isn't kind of doing enough around taking advantage of the nighttime economy. So in terms of the next steps, officers will go into more detail in a minute about the kind of licensing and women's safety aspects, but just kind of zooming out, the kind of next steps are we're going to be forming a working group led by the Future Merton team, so the economic regen team, rather than the kind of licensing team, because it's thinking about it kind of as a whole, but working really, really closely with all the affected departments. And so we'll be aiming to start to develop a strategy over the coming year. We want to kind of gather data, including residents' views, mapping who night workers are, working with local businesses and local police. What we've learned from other local authorities who are a little bit further ahead than us, including Wandsworth, who we're very lucky that our regulatory service partnership covers Wandsworth and we can learn from that work, is that work takes a lot of time to like gather that data and make sure you're getting an accurate picture of who is in your borough at night. So they began work on theirs, I think, over a year ago, and it kind of hasn't finished yet. So that's to kind of manage expectations a little bit. But beyond that kind of just engagement analysis, there'll be a lot of consultation with groups, including yourselves, but also local residents and local parties. So I'm going to stop talking and hand over to officers to talk in a bit more detail about licensing and community safety aspects.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. Who's going to make a start?
So the big question, obviously, for the licensing committee is what is sort of licensing role in the nighttime economy? The licensing policy is going to be really key and pivotal along with the nighttime strategy to provide that clear vision of how we can support that nighttime economy and then the nighttime strategy and all. The licensing policy, as we all know, supports those 4 licensing objectives and they're listed up there, but for those, just for clarity, it's the crime and prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm. And it can help bring about this effective partnership working, which is going to be absolutely key within the nighttime strategy. The policy is absolutely essential to set that right tone, and together with the strategy will bring that framework for a vibrant and safe borough. It needs to be really careful and a collaborative piece of work. So we've got to ensure that the two will work hand in hand. And the bigger piece of work is obviously envisaging what we want from our neighbourhoods. What do we want them to look at night? And then working how we can encourage that activity overall. So it's just so essential that everyone can work together on this piece.
Covering off some of the women's safety work. So my role is to lead on the women's safety work as part of our VORG agenda for the council. And what we did was we teamed up with Kingston, Richmond and Wandsworth, and we bidded for some Home Office money called Safer Streets Fund. And that money, it's quite hard to get hold of, so we were really pleased we got it. But the theme this time around was to look at women's safety in our nighttime economy. So as a 4-borough, these are some of the projects that it's funded and funding. So it's done some work with our professionals around boys to men training. Our nighttime economy staff had some training around vulnerability, anti-sexual harassment. We are looking across Merton and Kingston to do a women's nighttime economy strategy, which will feed into our overall strategy. Richmond and Wandsworth have already got a nighttime strategy, which includes the women's safety piece. So the two for us will be joined together under that women's safety strategy and our borough strategy. We're looking to do the women's safety toolkit, business toolkit, like a really handy guide for businesses on how they can keep women safe in their venues. We've done a male accountability survey and a survivors group survey, and we're just waiting for the results to come back on both of them, because it's also looking at what people's attitudes are, what survivors are saying. So survivors of street harassment, sexual harassment, what are they saying to us? What's positive, what's not positive, and how do we work from that? And then the other part was our bystander training, and that's open to anyone. And it is looking at how our residents can either intervene or find safe options when supporting a victim or survivor on the street. And we know a lot of our residents will say, well, I saw something, I heard something, I didn't quite know what to do. And that bystander training kind of upskills them on those options. Sometimes it may be calling 999, maybe talking to, a member of staff at a venue and say, I've seen something, I want to report it. So there's some of the projects that the Safer Streets has kind of funded. And as you'll see, the next slide, please, quite a lot of them look at the nighttime economy because of the Safer Streets funding. And like I say, the training has been rolled out to a lot of the staff in the venues across the 4 boroughs. And we're looking at how we can sustain that over the coming kind of 12, 18 months, 2 years, but also how some of that can link with we were discussing some of the licensing conditions that venues need to upskill themselves around vulnerability and how they support, you know, customers that go into their venues. And again, like I say, the nighttime economy strategy, it's due to be finalised in September. And at the moment, we are arranging a bit of a nighttime audit, very similar to the one that happened in October. So the company is going around all 4 boroughs, looking at their nighttime economy and giving us kind of suggestions on safety, really, for women that we can put in that strategy. The other thing that all 4 boroughs have signed up to is our MOPAC Nighttime Economy Charter. And it's about London boroughs saying this is what we are promising we're going to do. We're going to make our economy safer for our residents. And we've signed up to that. And a lot of those targets will be in the women's strategy, but it will feed into that nighttime economy strategy as well. And like I say, the business toolkit, that is due to come out, I think it's April time. We're just working across the 4 boroughs to work out what goes in it and kind of test it with our venues to say, does this work? Does it not work? You know, we could set up a toolkit and we give it to a venue and a venue says, well, actually, that totally doesn't work for us. So we're going to then do a little bit of a consultation with some venues to see if it works for them. And we're also working with the police around their wave training. They've got an e-learning video on the wave training and they rolled it out a few years ago, but they're redoing it again. And it's just how we can get all our businesses to watch the wave training to understand how they can support anyone coming into their venue. And I think many people have heard about Ask for Angela. A really big plug, Merton was the first borough. We worked with the police, we were the initiative, and then the Met rolled it out across the whole of London. And at the last time I checked, which I think was the end of last year, we had about 90% of our venues that all knew what Ask for Angela was. We did use some cadets at the end of last year and get them to go in venues and ask for Angela and see what happened. Yeah, definitely. And Ask for Angela is the initiative. It was originally set up and it's still the same as it was all those years ago. If someone feels unsafe, if someone has met someone in a venue and they feel unsafe or they're unsure, they can go up to the bar and ask for Angela. And that's a code word for staff to know that someone is feeling unsafe or just needs that extra support to kind of leave the venue. And we did have a lady that went up to a member of staff and asked for Angela, and they actually helped get a taxi home, and she ended up reporting to the police what she'd experienced, but the venue supported her to get out of the venue, get in the taxi and get home safely. So it's a really, really good initiative. I think lots of boroughs use it a lot because it is a really easy tool, and it was just training all the venues around if someone asks for Angela, what does that actually mean, and be curious and say, are you okay? Can we help? So we'll continue to keep rolling that out because it is quite well known, it's quite publicised.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Chair. So that's kind of the summary of where we are. We have this ambition to develop a greater variety of options of using our area at night, including many options that will come across the licensing committee's desk in the future, while still supporting night workers and maintaining kind of low levels of crime and antisocial behaviour. But we're really keen to get your thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Very much for the extensive presentation. I was going to ask, what connection have you got with street pastors? Because I know the street pastors are in Martin.
So we've worked really closely with Merton Street Pastors, and all the other 4 boroughs have got street pastors. So we've kind of really linked in across the 4 boroughs. But for Merton, we've worked really closely with them around, you know, where they're going, the people they're looking after. And as part of some funding we had in, they had the funding so that they could go out and do more patrols and recruit more street pastors. But they're also part of Kingston's partnership as well, and they support them with their safe space in Kingston. So there's kind of lots of options we can do to work with street pastors going forward because they are brilliant.
Committee in a minute. Yeah, I just wanted to have some clarification. Obviously, I declare an interest in terms of crime and disorder. One of the things that we used to find out in the courts was that enough evidence was not provided to the CPS to prosecute perpetrators of this crime, and it was very difficult. How are you going to make, do you think there's been an improvement in terms of weekends? Because if you sit in the Magistrates Court in Wimbledon, one of the things you'll find out is that weekend is the worst time to go on a Monday to court, because most magistrates don't like to sit in court on a Monday because they will have all the nitty-gritty that happens in Wimbledon town centre and also Mitcham town centre. So what has been done, you know, over the last few years to ensure that the police have enough evidence to pass to the CPS before the cases are brought to the court? Because in terms of how you deal with these cases, you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt before you can prosecute someone.
Yeah, so I know that we've been working really closely with the Southwest BCU police around VAUG in general and about improving their investigations of crime and harassment, especially kind of the women's safety side. And I know that the police have been improving that evidence gathering to kind of put to the CPS, because I know, as we know, Edith, yes, the CPS, if they don't have the right evidence, yeah, they can't always do their part. So we are working really, really closely with the public protection team in the Southwest BCU on that side. In terms of the antisocial behaviour side.
I just wanted to add, Chair, that in terms of licensing, any antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder in a licensed premises, we would look to, and I know we've had recently had a summary review. So if it's a really bad incident linked to a licensed premises, the matter would be referred to the licensing subcommittee to either look at either revoking a license or imposing stringent conditions. That's how we will deal with any incidents linked to a licensed premises. It would be before the committee for them to determine whether that license can continue or not. Okay.
And Chair, if I can just add, as a general, we, as the local authority, work very closely with the police on all crime reduction strategies. We've got a legal responsibility to do so. We have the locations board, nighttime economy features quite heavily in that, and we do fortnightly tasking with the police to ensure that everything's being coordinated. Left hand knows what the right hand is doing. Clearly, we've got really good infrastructure in Merton. We've got very good CCTV. That's all been updated. Thanks to the commitment made by this council to upgrade to digital and improve. We have a very good working relationship, as has been mentioned, with Southwest BCU. Just on policing generally, you'll see the new commissioner has made a commitment around a dedicated superintendent for each borough. I think that's going to help enhance the neighbourhood policing models. Now, we've got some questions around that, and Councillor Stringer and I have been talking about how we best respond. But I think you can be reassured that there's certainly a lot more coordination that goes on to try and prevent in the first place. We've got really good powers that the council and police can use to prevent and deal with individuals. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance. Thank you.
And then in lots of our town centres, you know, there are schemes like PubWatch that exist where the businesses are sharing information between themselves, so that if somebody comes in that they know is an issue, they can report it straight away. So there's a lot of kind of, it comes down to coordination and partnership. I think your initial question was about evidence, and that is, you know, really, really hard, which is why so much of the focus is on prevention.
Now from the committee, we'll start with Councillor Dolimo.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think one thing that's really important to bear in mind when building this strategy is that trust levels in the police are at record lows. There are a lot of people, particularly women, who have absolutely no faith in our police force after what we've seen in the last couple of months and years. Most recently with the case of David Carrick, So I think it's really important when building the strategy to factor that in, because there may well be women who feel even less trust and faith in that route than before. My question was, can we as a licensing committee simply propose that if people would like to apply for licenses, they sign up to the Ask Angela policy? That would be, a simple change I think we could make fairly quickly, just up to members of the committee to discuss it.
Thank you, councillor. Absolutely. And it's up to a licensing subcommittee to add conditions they feel is appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. I totally agree with you. I think that's quite reasonable. Certainly, when the licensing team are doing their negotiations, if it's not coming to a licensing subcommittee, it's going to be granted with delegated authority. We certainly be negotiating to ensure those type of conditions are on there. That gives you the reassurance, gives us the reassurance that the staff are appropriately trained and know how to spot signs of vulnerability.
Right, can I just to add on that, and actually one conversation we've just been having at the very start was with the sustainability, what we can do to try and get those who have conditions varied. So obviously it needs to go through a minor variation to get those conditions added. And we've just been having conversations about the best way to get minor variations in some of those places to get such conditions added. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, I think obviously this is something I think that's very important to the council. In terms of my own experience, I was first chair of the licensing committee when it was transferred to this council between 2004 and 2006. At that time, obviously, antisocial behaviour was a huge issue, especially in Wimbledon Town Centre and Wimbledon Village, where we had obviously the cumulative impact policy, which obviously was in place until quite recently. Which obviously a rebuttable presumption in terms of the granting of further premises license. What I will say is that the nighttime economy has dramatically changed since the mid-noughties, in that large numbers of licensed premises have obviously closed down. A lot of restaurants are struggling. The impact of COVID, changing trends, sometimes with young people, probably less now going out than compared to once upon a time for a night on the town because of costs, but also as well, we know that the nighttime economy supports so many jobs, especially in Wimbledon Town Centre, where you've got a very successful theatre, you've got a cinema, and it's having enough of an experience where people want to stay the night, or when they come back from work, they want to go to a restaurant. So it's obviously making the town centre as attractive as possible. And my question obviously leads is, what can we do in terms of flexibility in terms of our own licensing policy in encouraging those premises? Because I probably will say now, and I can say this many years later, that I think some of our policies were quite restrictive at one time. In Wimbledon, there was concerns by residents about crime and disorder, and I had to deal with many. But ultimately, I think having a flexible policy and recognising that does a huge amount to support business in the borough, but also as well investing in our local economy is vitally important, and ensuring that we as a council support that economy as well.
Thank you, Councillor Welton. So you're absolutely right. It's a very difficult place the local authority sits in being regulator, and our responsibilities around ensuring that the economy works for everybody. Councillor String and I and colleagues have had lots of discussion about policy. Now, we've got to have a statement of licensing policy, as you know, Councillor, and there are some restrictions about what you can do with that, but I think our policy needs to talk much more about what we want as opposed to what we don't want. Promoting a very diverse nighttime economy, as Councillor Stringer spoke about, it's not just about what we deem in the sort of professional world as vertical drinking establishments. It's about promoting restaurants. It's about ensuring that there's a diverse offer for people to enjoy at all times of the day that is child friendly, for example, because kids don't go to bed at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening anymore. And social behaviour does feature a lot, and there are lots of examples across London where perhaps not enough focus has been given on the impact of growing the licensed economy. I think we're quite lucky here because at Merton we are not as far advanced that we can learn the lessons of places where it hasn't gone so well. Certainly in the last two boroughs that I've worked at, we've got a lot of experience amongst us to ensure that we strike the right balance. So what will probably come with this review is a review of the nighttime strategy, is a review of the policy, not to loosen it up, not to leave residents vulnerable, but to, if I was a licensee or prospective licensee and I was going to open a restaurant in Merton, I want to see that the policy reflects that they want me in Merton. So that's what we're trying to achieve, if that gives you some reassurance about where we're going with it.
It does obviously give me some reassurance. Obviously, yeah, some of the personal experiences I've had. Of course, we've got to have obviously the licensing, the full licensing objectives, and a robust where residents can obviously raise these issues. Yeah, and if there is premises that need dealing with, they are dealt with accordingly in relation to the policy. Yeah, because we know obviously residents do have concerns, especially on public nuisance, but also crime and disorder. But we have a licensing policy that works, and I think does have that level of flexibility built into it. And I think sometimes in the past, our policies in this council have been slightly restrictive, and I will confess to being a guilty party in that when we had our original licensing policy back, but that was another time, another era, and there's different issues now in terms of obviously sustainability of the nighttime economy, and we've got to obviously keep up with those changing trends.
Thank you, Jeff. I can just come in as well. The example you gave there was about the theatre in Wimbledon, and I think our kind of cultural heritage and our cultural policy plays a big part in the type of economy that we have in our town centres, and then the type of establishments that you'll have, and then the type of incidents that you have. So, colleagues might know there's a proposal for a new concert hall in Wimbledon, which, I'm supportive of. And if we have a concert hall in Wimbledon, we will need more bars and restaurants to support them. And I would very much doubt that they would be causing the police many headaches of people coming to a kind of world-class Frank Gehry designed concert hall. Councillor Manley on the call has been putting on more evening cultural events in Mitcham and in Vestry Hall, and again there might be alcohol licenses that are needed there, but it's again back to the kind of, when we're talking about licensing and drinking establishments, they're not all the same, and different styles of management and different business models will attract different people, which is why it's about diversity. It's about diversity of offer.
Councillor Manley, because I think she was next on the line.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies that I'm not with you in person. Thank you very much, Councillor Stringer. And as you know, I'm a great supporter of the provision and improvement of what is currently no provision of nighttime economy here in Mitcham. I have a number of questions and examples that may be of use. Currently, there appears to be some kind of loophole which lies between establishments that do need to have a license in order to serve alcohol and play music. And they have to abide by those rules very strictly under those licenses, and that's fine. There is a different circumstance that we have to deal with here in Cricket Green, as an example to you, in that we have a church on the green, which consistently throughout the summer months will have parties, they call family parties, going on in their rather large hall, where they apparently are not selling alcohol, however they're serving it, play extremely loud music without any kind of form of control, causing absolute mayhem that spills out onto the green pretty much every weekend during the summer and many times during the autumn and winter. Now, in order to get someone down there to witness the problems, I can't call a noise officer out on a Saturday before 11 p.m. Now, this would have been going on since 2 o'clock in the afternoon very often. And I've tried very hard to get the church to prove that they are managing the site and that they're taking care of things. And they wrote to the licensing officers to say, oh, yes, we do this, we do that, and the other. The fact is they don't supervise. They open the doors and they disappear for the rest of the evening. So I need to understand how we can regulate what seems to be a bit of a loophole in terms of what has become very antisocial for those that live in this area. That's just one thing. In terms of improving safety for the nighttime economy that we're all desiring and wishing for, I have had such a struggle over the past few years, both as a resident, as a councillor, to introduce improved lighting, and where there is non-existing lighting in areas in Cricket Green, which are actually creating pockets of lack of safety for people like myself in the winter after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, whether it's a mother and child or an elderly person, where there is an absolute lack of lighting in Cricket Green. Also, by the Windmill Pub across from Mitcham Common, I've got a consistent complaint there's insufficient lighting for some of my residents to go. In order to be able to get lighting and for someone to actually take it seriously seems to be a bit of a problem. So maybe future Merton could have a listen to us about improving lighting, to improve safety, to encourage people out to the nighttime economy. And my last point that I would like to make, if I may, and then I'll shut up, is that in my efforts to begin what is a cultural and nighttime economy in this neck of the woods, some of the problems that we encounter is that the financial implications, for example, of having a pitch for a few hours on Fair Green Market Square to, for example, at Christmas, serve mulled wine at a Christmas event. It was so financially prohibitive with all the licensing and pitch licensing and alcohol licensing and being able to sell anything there. I gave up the ghost because it just was financially prohibitive. So what I'm asking is, in the interim, whilst we are making plans for a market manager and getting an infrastructure going, could we look at a temporary incentive scheme that would encourage people like myself and others to begin to put things on the market square, to actually encourage people, oh my goodness, we are actually doing something here, because right now it's just not worth anybody's while. It's too expensive, too complicated. And I don't know when we're going to be able to encourage young entrepreneurs or, you know, people to come and do a market for a day when they've shelled out over 100 quid to be there and might not make the 100 quid. So that's just a bit of feedback. I hope it's useful.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Can we have, you know,
thank you very much, Joe, Councillor Manley, and I know we've talked about some of these issues before, but starting with that last one, yeah, we realised that particularly in that area around the Mitcham Market, there will be more support needed to encourage, attract and manage stalls, and that's why we are looking at hiring a market manager, hopefully going to advert quite soon. And we think we might need to get a kind of company in to help oversee some of that work. I won't comment on the actual cost of licensing. I'm going to leave that to my more detailed colleagues. The lighting we can take away. I can't remember if you raised that one with me before. The bit about kind of regulating behaviour when people are kind of going through those loopholes of, you know, it isn't a licensed event, is a really tricky one. And again, I think one that requires a kind of multi-agency response that we're happy to take offline as well. But I don't know if colleagues want to comment on the licensing aspect.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, the fee regime for all the different licensing regimes can be quite daunting, quite difficult. Some of it is statutory, so anything to do with alcohol, those fees are set in law. We do have fees and charges process for other things. I think there's something worthwhile in what you say there about making it simpler, making sure that that transaction between the council and potential trader is as seamless as possible, that there aren't so many applications. Can we kind of sew it up in one? And that's certainly some feedback we'll take away today. See, you know, can we meet our statutory obligations by making it easier for the customer to do business with us? Absolutely, we'll take that away. On the church issue you mentioned in the summer, I'm really sorry to hear about the frustrations you had. It is a loophole. It's only the retail sale of alcohol that is licensable. Hence, there's no license required. I mean, this is just wanton bad behaviour, really. And what I'll do is I'll take this away and work with my ASB team and get some feedback from you as to how we're going to prevent it this summer. I hope that helps.
Sorry, before we continue, can I welcome Councillor Hall? We're just discussing the nighttime economy, and obviously we've had a presentation, but no doubt you will get an up-to-date information later. So we're just taking questions now. Okay, thank you for coming. Can I take Councillor Williscroft, please?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, is Wimbledon Police Station, is it going to be fully staffed, and will its opening hours reflect this in order to cope with this revitalized, nighttime economy? Because my understanding, talking to families, I've got children where I live, that quite often when crime is committed in Merton, a lot of them are funneled to Sutton, Kingston and Wandsworth. So is it going to be open fully staffed, opening hours, because there's going to be more crime? That's my question,
Thank you, Councillor Williscroft. So first of all, just be clear, we're talking about the nighttime economy across the whole borough, definitely not just Wimbledon Town Centre, Wimbledon and Police Station being our main police station, though, other than Richmond Police Station. I mean, colleagues will know that we're very committed to keeping both stations open and fully staffed. And Wimbledon Police Station at the moment is absolutely chocker, actually, if you go, it is very, very busy. I think the fair point you're raising is that if you increase activity, we might need to increase police activity, and that's why I mentioned in our presentation that we'll have to do this work in collaboration with the police. Because let's be clear, the police would love us to not have anything open past 6 o'clock every night, because everyone could just go home and there'd be no crime other than lots and lots of domestic abuse. That's what the crime would be. I think life is a little bit more complicated than that, and but as we said, we think the focus has to be on prevention. But you're right, we do need to also ensure that local police have the resources to kind of address any issues that Calvin wants to come in.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, Councillor, is the Commissioner has published a turnaround plan. We are responding to that. He has said there will be a review of the estate strategy that was going to close a number of police stations across London and has already closed number of police stations across London. If you Lambeth as an example, there's only Brixton Police Station that's open to the public now, when there used to be 4. So he accepts that in order for neighbourhood policing to be effective, officers need to be within a reasonable distance of where they're working, and he accepts that it needs to be torn up and start again. So you can have some reassurance. Doesn't mean necessarily that we will save all 2, but we will fight tooth and nail, absolutely. But it's certainly on his radar now.
Mercy.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as I'm at the end of the row, I think some of the points I wanted to raise have been covered already. Thank you for the presentation, everybody. As you probably know, Councillor Stringer, I'm hoping to knock on your door at some point before long in relation to a rapporteur scrutiny inquiry that I'm doing at the moment. If you don't know, I'll make sure you know later. But that has an infrastructure element, and that was the word that has come up repeatedly, that it doesn't make sense for us to expand what we're doing in the evenings and nights if we don't have the infrastructure in place to cope with it. I was pleased to hear that you think that the camera provision is reasonable. Is it enough? Depends on how much you expand it. Likewise, the lighting, which was raised. If you don't have enough lighting, your cameras aren't going to work. If you don't have soft infrastructure in the form of the police, you're going to get problems. My inquiry is about toilet provision. These women that you're talking about may not be able to find toilets in the evenings, and other people who want to do things in the evenings, because what provision there is during the daytime may not be there after 5:30 in the evening. So that would be my point, question, encouragement. infrastructure, if you don't have the infrastructure in place, which is varied and sufficient and simultaneously doing the job, you can have a fantastic provision on one side and completely fall down on another. So for what it's worth.
Thank you, Councillor Mercer. I'll come back quickly on that. Now, I didn't know I'm about to be buttonholed by you, but very excited about that. Yeah, I think three aspects that we kind of haven't talked about enough, but I think are absolutely critical are shops, cafes and toilets. So places where you can just go out and do your shopping in the evening because people are busy working during the day. You know, I was just with Love Wimbledon earlier today. There's still not that many shops even there that are open past kind of 6 o'clock. Cafes, so that you don't, if you don't want to go and get a drink, but you want to go and have a hot chocolate or a coffee. Most of the lovely independent cafes I know are all shut at 4 p.m. because they're run by they're small businesses, which is completely understandable. But by gosh, if Coffee in the Wood was open in the evening in Collier's Wood, it would be doing a thriving trade. And toilets are critical, not just for the kind of visitors and people out socializing of an evening, but the night workers as well, which is a crucial aspect that I haven't seen. So as I said, kind of people going through Morden, for example, and in the evening, and we do kind of have a small community toilet scheme, and I think that is where we could do more work. But having more shops open and more cafes open would also help with that.
And I suppose, could I just add, I think as Councillor Stringer touched on at the start, we are in a really good position and that we can share we've seen some of the data that Wandsworth have gathered. And all of these points are things that we need to consider before we decide where we are hoping to aim towards. All of this infrastructure, all of the physical stuff is everything that we need to gather the data on. So there'll be no decision really made on where the nighttime strategy, where are we aiming towards, until we know what is needed and what we can really provide.
Yeah, for me, I've noticed that in recent years, more and more of the nighttime economy seems to centre around chicken shops. There's more and more of them opening up, and you see a lot of young people there, and they're at the chicken shop, they're smoking the weed outside, and you know, maybe drinking cans of beer or whatever, but there doesn't seem to be the places for them to go to, and that is a real shame.
I'll come in on two aspects of that. I regularly get asked, what can I do what can we do to stop there being more chicken shops open, and the kind of powers we have are relatively limited if it's a private premises and it's private business. Other than what we can do is come up with a bigger vision for a town centre or neighbourhood and try and deliver on that, and try and drive and attract different businesses. But the point you're getting at around young people and where they go, I think that's another important aspect of the nighttime economy is community centres and halls and youth activities, and you know, as part of our borough sport activities, putting more sports activities on in the evening as well. So I think involving young people and their voice here is going to be absolutely critical. So that's a good reminder of something that we need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Public safety, public nuisance, women's safety is of course absolutely paramount. There's a danger in these conversations that we focus on the negative aspects of the nighttime economy, not enough on the positive. And I've really enjoyed Councillor Welton's intervention. Could you just give me a bit more about what we're doing to help businesses, or are we talking to businesses? During COVID, we released some road space for outside dining and drinking. Are there more opportunities for that? Are there more creative things we can do to help businesses? Because, you know, as you know, I own a bar in Westminster. It's a really tough time out there for the hospitality trade, and they need the help we can give them, because, as you say, they're huge employers, and they're hugely important to our society, our community.
Yeah, so working with businesses more generally is a huge thing that we have a role to play in, and that we are already doing some work into. You talked about the kind of pocket parks where we closed down car parking spaces, and yet they're still there, and I think it's 7 different locations. I think it was one that we were looking at because it wasn't really working so well. Anything like that business wants to talk to us about, we'd always be open to ideas. Because we've also been doing things like renovating shopping parades in areas where they've been underinvested in, where the businesses themselves don't have the money to do so, but where there've been large developments in the area, so close to me on Hayden's Road, or and Pollard's Hill recently. We've done two big shopping parades. So that's the type of thing that we can put our kind of community infrastructure levy and our capital money towards, where we think it will have that kind of bigger impact on the local economy, those businesses and residents. As I understand it, kind of business rates start nationally, and as I understand it, there's some changes coming through on those at the moment, which might positively help elements of the hospitality sector and so on, which will be interesting to see. But no, we work really closely with our kind of our business improvement districts, our chamber, and working with individual businesses is harder because there's lots of different ones with lots of different needs. But it's an area that I agree we should get better at, and we should understand what it is that they want and how we as a council can enable that.
And councillor, just to reiterate, the business and planning bill was what came out of COVID to allow for outside space. That's still going. Businesses have the opportunity to make applications for pavement licenses. We assess those clearly for highway safety, and there's a nominal fee in comparison to what people used to pay. It's a very nominal fee. So that's the government's commitment to trying to help the hospitality industry. Our aim in regulation is always to support compliant, well-run businesses to thrive. We take very limited enforcement action where absolutely necessary, and you see those when they come to subcommittee. And there have been recent examples where actually we've just reached the end of the road and there's nothing else we can do. And you as a licensing committee or subcommittee have taken the action that you've taken. That is always the last resort. There is so much that goes on behind the scenes to get them compliant, to get them working with us. We have no desire whatsoever as regulators to shut people down unless they are unsafe, unless they're not promoting the licensing objectives. So you can always be reassured from a regulatory perspective. We always keep that local government officer hat on before we become the regulator to promote and businesses and ensure they thrive.
Yeah, I had sort of two questions. The first was sort of, I appreciate these strategies take a long time to develop and you want to get it right, but we're sort of going to start moving into the summer months soon, which is obviously a big opportunity for business in the nighttime economy, lighter evenings, more enjoyable to be out and about, more pleasant for people. Have you identified any opportunities that could be sort of brought in this summer across sort of our town centres or sort of public spaces to sort of encourage things this summer? Because so businesses that have struggled over the last couple of years, now that COVID seems well and truly behind us, can have a really good summer and lots of sort of fresh opportunities.
I'll go first, thank you. Yeah, so I suppose whilst we're saying that we want to kind of think carefully about strategy and get it right, it doesn't stop us doing things kind of tomorrow and today. And, and in the meantime, we want to encourage and support, as we've just been discussing, all of our kind of positive businesses and the positive aspect that they're having on lives. So a couple of points. Yeah, you mentioned kind of events over the summer. We think events taking place in our parks is a really positive thing because it brings in the council money, delivers events that local residents can go to, and then we have visitors coming to our borough to those events, which benefits the local community. So we're looking at speaking to some promoters about some of those kind of music events, but some of those are more kind of, again, arts, cultural events, like putting on plays in parks and so on over the summer evenings. And from our early work with the GLA so far, one of the things that they've said is really important when doing your consultation is to not to do it in the abstract and not just ask a survey of people about what they think about X, Y, Z. But whilst things are going on and whilst people are out in the evening, speak to them there and there. So I think that will be the kind of opportunities. If there are events happening over the summer, even if we haven't developed our strategy, then that'll be a good time to kind of temperature check on people and see how they feel about being out and what they don't think there's enough of in the area and so on.
I'll come.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just wondered how you were going to, or if you were thinking about getting smaller independent businesses in, so we don't have a lot of chains, but we have a more diverse business businesses for the evening economy, and also how you're going to bring residents with you for this, because would be great if we had a fantastic nighttime economy, but certainly in Wimbledon, a lot of the streets and residents are very, very close to where the high streets will be. So how are you going to bring them along with you so the change can happen without there being huge amounts of fights about it? Thank you.
Yeah, and I suppose we're not necessarily saying that there's going to be a huge change in Wimbledon. We're saying there might be an increase in diversity and different types of it, but it won't necessarily be kind of, you know, louder and thousands more people in the streets. I suppose that's one of the things that we want to understand from residents is what would they be happy with? Would it be like, say, kind of great diversity? So yes, there are people out there at different times throughout the night, some of them being shoppers and then some of them coming out later. I think that the key, so to answer that point about how we're going to bring residents along with us, it's about involving them in the consultation of the shaping of the strategy before we kind of launch straight into a, yes, we think that Wimbledon is a right place for a nightclub or idea or something like that. And again, like thinking about, you know, our other areas across Merton, they do look very different and they face different issues. So think very carefully about locations and where they are in relation to other residents, I think will be absolutely critical. There's another part of your question, I've forgotten what it was.
About smaller businesses, so it's not all chains.
Yeah, yes, completely. I mean, we're lucky in Wimbledon that we've got some kind of new businesses actually taking advantage of those new spaces being opened up in Centre Court, for example. I think a lot of that is about when places become vacant, making sure that small businesses know about them, they have the offers. And we have some, I think we already kind of use some of our kind of powers that we have under the kind of business rates to kind of encourage kind of pop-ups or new businesses and so on. But yeah, I'd love to see more.
Nancy, did you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It was simply to say, will we have a copy of the slides of the presentation? Please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just asked back on, sorry, to take you back to the Safer Streets presentation. It said the funding sort of ends in March 2023. So I guess that's coming to an end. And you sort of took us through a lot of the initiatives. But I was wondering whether, in your view, it had worked, both in terms of sort of number of crime, number of incidents, if you compare sort of autumn, winter that's just passed and maybe sort of autumn, winter 1920, you know, pre-COVID. And then also, you know, the other sort of metric, the experiential, do people feel safe in the evenings on our streets? Or, you know, has that moved under these initiatives?
I think in terms of the initiatives ending at the end of March, we're going to be doing some work around how we sustain some of those initiatives. You know, we're not going to get the Safer Streets money again, so how do we look at sustaining those? And like we were saying, we were discussing some of the bits around the vulnerability training on licenses and how can we have that package available once that money's ended. I think at the end of the funding, the 4 boroughs will be looking at what's been the impact of those initiatives, and which ones worked, which ones didn't, and again, how we sustain them. And I think as part of that kind of evaluation at the end of the funding, the Home Office do ask us to say, you know, what's been the impact? What is your crime? Has it reduced? Has it gone down? So there will be an evaluation period at the end of it. We had to submit some figures to them around our crimes and our crime types. And I think for out the 4 boroughs, only one had really gone out for consultation around what's people's views on kind of women's safety. Yes, all 4 boroughs had done kind of consultations like strategic assessment and other crime surveys. But it's one of those that we want to do at the end of the evaluation. And I think with some of the survivor work we did, which is asking survivors of street harassment, sexual harassment, those sort of things, finding out what they're telling us. So that will all kind of be part of that evaluation at the ends of the projects, to see what was the impact, what have we learned, and did it help improve our crime figures, and did it help improve the safety? I think it's kind of well documented. I think, as the other councillor said, that I think women do feel unsafe in certain situations, and we do see that in some of our strategic assessment consultations. So we will be kind of looking at those to see what people are telling us. And I think that'd be the good thing at the end, is that we can kind of look back, what went well, what didn't go well, but actually what are people telling us at the end of it? And I know that Kingston did do a women's safety survey. Yes, Kingston's very big, it's very different from Merton, but the voices are very similar to what some of our survivors have been saying around lighting, around certain areas. I think as women, we all know, you know, about keeping ourselves safe. And I think for us, it's about changing that narrative around, let's not tell women to stay safe. Actually, let's tell others not to be hurting. And I think just as a general, to tell others not to be hurting, and how do we prevent crime? And how do we put that focus back on others, being allies at looking out for other humans? So for us, there will be some evaluation, and I hope to be able to share that kind of springtime, because the 4 boroughs, yeah, do have to do some of that evaluation work from the funding.
Thank you. Sorry. Did you want to? I was going to wind up in a minute. Yeah.
Because yeah, I think it'd be really helpful if that did come back to this committee and we could see it, because I mean, getting crime down is important of itself, but if people don't feel safe, then they won't come out to enjoy the nighttime economy, you know, under any circumstance. So it's important to get the numbers down, you know, because we just shouldn't tolerate crime, but the perception is super important for people as well.
Absolutely. Perception is people's reality. And certainly we've just conducted a strategic needs assessment of what our community safety priorities should be this year, and perceptions of safety and confidence is on that list. You know, you will hear that Merton is the 3rd safest borough. It flits between the 3rd and 5th and the 4th, just because those sort of bottom 5 very close in number. But we can say that all we like. If people don't feel it, they don't feel it. And certainly the police in their turnaround plan are really focusing on perceptions being people's realities and how they change those perceptions. So 100% agree with you there.
Oh, okay, yes, because obviously Councillor Hall, you weren't here. I'll give you time to ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to say I recently attended bystander training, which was really, really useful. And if there's any way that we can promote that more widely, that would be fantastic, and it help people understand a little bit more about, you know, safety and how to step in if necessary, or witness, and you know. So I'm sorry if you've covered that already.
I'm pleased to hear it was really good and you went to it. I also attended it and I thought it was really, really good. The next session is on the 14th of March. And in the slides, I'll make sure the link's on it. And anyone, yeah, please share far and wide. It really does get you thinking about that kind of community emotion and how we can all play our part in supporting others. So yeah, please share it. And we will look to try and sustain that over the next 12 months, because it is really good training.
Councillor Charles, you want to do the final question?
Yeah, what I was going to say was, I mean, some of the areas in the borough are really brilliant for nightlife, like Wimbledon Village, but there's others, sadly, like Morden, which definitely needs the regeneration. It's been promised for years and years now, and it has to come sometime because it's getting more and more run down around here.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a 24-hour tube. It should be a 24-hour town. It should be a thriving town. Yeah, the work is underway on yeah, trying to push forward with the regen plans. I'm with you.
Item on the agenda is any licenses committee miscellaneous matters. Are there any at all? No, I take it as no. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Stringer, for your excellent presentation. And as members of the committee have said, we look forward to receiving the slides. And this is the initial stages. So obviously the final stages will complete in September. By then we'll have a full report and we'll be inviting you to come back to the next committee meeting once all your inquiries are complete. Thank you to the team as well. very much appreciated. And I think we've enjoyed the answers which has been given, and we look forward to the full report. And I would also like to thank members of the committee for coming tonight, because most of you have been at meetings every day this week. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you to the officers as well.